This week, Grenfell survivors and bereaved have been shining a light on what they believe is the inadequate response from the authorities to the fire that killed 72 people. 2 years on, what's become clear is that this was not a freak accident. It was just waiting to happen. The cladding was just one part of the problem, compounded by flammable insulation and missing fire breaks. And although these construction methods were compliant, the regulatory framework was flawed. According to industry experts, we now know there are possibly more than 1,000 buildings around the UK constructed using similar dangerous cladding systems. Less than 2 miles along London's Westway is the exclusive Monk & Beck Marshall development in Paddington. The building may look very different to Grenfell, but under the surface, it's the same in many ways.
So basically it's all of the silver cladding. You see all of that silver stuff?
Yeah.
So that's the ACM stuff, which is the same stuff that was on the Grenfell Tower.
Yeah.
And the whole back of the building is that stuff, and then the whole roof as well. So like the thing is basically essentially a death trap.
Yeah. Mariam Ali lives in one of the 152 flats built here in 2005 as part of the redevelopment of Paddington Basin.
Oh, we're not even allowed to have mats anymore because it's a fire hazard, and I try not to think about it on a day-to-day basis anymore, just because I wasn't sleeping. I was like, you know, you can, I mean, it takes a serious toll.
The distress of the leaseholders here is not just that their homes have been condemned as unsafe by independent building engineers, it's over who pays. The government say it's morally right for developers to contribute towards the costs, but like many, the developers here, European land, are telling the leaseholders to pay, and they've no legal grounds to refuse.
There's been absolutely no understanding of, like, you know, people don't have tens of thousands of pounds just lying around. I think it's now it's nearly 10 million, basically.
For the whole building?
For the whole building.
And how much would that be for you or for your family?
Over £70,000. So that's the minimum estimate.
Leaseholders from all over the country have found themselves in the same situation and have started to come together.
Yeah.
William Martin owns a flat in Sheffield, which has since been discovered has flammable cladding. Last month, with other homeowners, he brought their campaign to Westminster.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for attending this evening's cladding forum. So
the government responded, or at least appeared to.
The government has allocated £200 million to replace cladding in around 170.
This seemed to be a win for the campaigners, but the small print revealed a big catch. The fund would only be available to those living with the same type of cladding that was on Grenfell, known as ACM.
Hello?
William was on the phone to the Housing Minister, Kit Malthouse, the following morning.
Yeah, speaking. Hi, Kit.
It's now clear that ACM is not the only sort of flammable cladding that's being used extensively on our buildings.
Just covering ACM cladded building ticks the box that you have addressed post-Grenfell concerns. It's not adequate. When Grenfell number 2 happens again on a non-ACM cladded building, the government will be looked upon back in shame.
According to the fire service, the NV development in Salford Quays has a different but equally dangerous cladding system.
Nice big apartments, beautiful place actually. So yeah, very happy to be living here from all that point of view. Currently this building is condemned as unsafe, so there's no option, we have to fix it. I've got a letter from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and this is confirmation that our particular building is not covered. It's different to Grenfell in its specification, but its fire ability is just the same. It's just as inflammable, if not more so, than the ACM. So it's a bonfire waiting to be lit. Basically, this is the flammable cladding here, this column going up. So any fire that starts at the bottom here is going straight up, and my apartment is at the top of this chimney, right up there.
Looking at this doesn't look to me like cladding.
Absolutely, it looks like concrete. We also once saw the pictures of Grenfell on the news at the time and thought, how terrible. Good job that couldn't happen here. But in fact, it's very, very similar. Very similar.
We asked the developers Countryside Properties for a comment, but they declined. The local government association has been responding to the cladding scandal since the morning of the fire.
Individual flats or blocks.
Its chair, Lord Porter, is critical of the government's response.
So when we checked for ACM, we should have checked for everything. What else is it clad with? There are a number of products out there that almost certainly at some point will fail, and we should have found out what those products were at the first time of doing a stock take.
Is there anything that you can reveal about what the potential scale of all of this might be?
In my own mind, I know the cost of fixing it is considerably more than the money that's on the table at the moment. So that should give you some idea of...
How much do you imagine it will actually cost?
I don't think we're going to get much change out of £2 billion by the time we've seen this off.
So far, the government have pledged just 10% of that figure, £200 million, to fix ACM cladding on private buildings. Mariam's building may be eligible for a share of that fund, but it's likely to only cover a fraction of their repair costs. Meanwhile, she has to watch while European Lands, the original developers, continue to build around her.
The council and the local authority, instead of maybe holding them responsible, holding them accountable, trying to get leverage to make them pay as the government has recommended that they do, they carry on giving them planning permission to build these buildings.
In a statement, European Land told us their new building here is constructed of non-combustible materials. And in regards to Mariam's building, they told us,
the cost of the remedial works attributable to the removal and replacement of the ACM cladding is estimated at £7.5 million. We have no reason to believe that the majority of these costs will not be covered by the fund.
The government are scheduled to test 6 different types of potentially flammable cladding, which could be on thousands of homes around the UK. And many people living in these suspect buildings do not even know they could be at risk. We've been told about a building in Acton that's rented as student accommodation and has some highly combustible cladding.
Has anybody talked to you about the cladding on the building at all?
We did have emails about the cladding and, they're doing work.
We have emergency essential work to be carried out on all external cladding around the building. To facilitate this, operatives will be abseiling from the rooftops. And as I said, thanks for understanding.
Has there been any discussion about the cladding on this building at all, apart from that email that you've had?
Not that I know of.
And nobody suggested at any point that the cladding might be flammable?
No.
Industry experts have told us some cladding here is Trespa high-pressure laminate, which is known to be at least as flammable as the cladding that was on Grenfell Tower. The building owners IQ have told us that on this day, the abseilers were checking for loose panels. In a statement, they went on to say,
student safety is our utmost priority, and at no point has the safety of students been at risk. We have the appropriate fire safety measures in place. We can confirm that we will be replacing a small amount of the cladding.
The Grenfell tragedy had revealed that for years, relaxed regulations have allowed companies to legally profit whilst making buildings we now know could be unsafe.
Grenfell was just the start of it. I mean, those people lost their lives, and that was just the very beginning. To think that that massive tragedy was just the beginning of showing you the massive scale of this problem across the whole country, that's on so many levels. It's not just about cladding. It's about corruption and incompetence from the top down, and yet somehow the people at the very bottom are the ones who have to pay for it. How is that right?
As we remember those who died 2 years ago today, the work to prevent another tragedy on this scale has barely begun. To ensure every building in Britain is safe will cost more than any of us can anticipate, and will take decades, unless something urgent is done.
Well, in a statement, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government told us today there is nothing more important than supporting those affected by the Grenfell Tower tragedy and making sure the lessons are learned so this never happens again. We have been clear that there are no more excuses, and we expect these buildings to be remediated as quickly as possible. We are backing local authorities to take enforcement action where building owners are refusing to act.